For centuries, our hair has been a way to express our creativity and culture. But imagine if it meant the difference between life and death.
Hi, my name's Zainab J. I'm a freelance makeup artist from London and I work in film and television. Today I'm going to be recreating some methods of hairstyling that were essential for the survival of African people.
For our people, hair has played an important role in survival. Our ancestors would place rice, seeds, and sometimes gold on the scalp between two sections of hair. They did this so that if they were captured and forced to voyage across the Atlantic, they'd at least have a small amount of food for sustenance. The technique was also used if they were planning a brave escape. Seeds and gold could help them build their new life.
Finding out that people hid food in hair was really a shock to me, but I also wasn't surprised because I don't think there's a style that is more meaningful than braiding. It's been used for so many reasons throughout African history. It makes the style even more meaningful, even more powerful, gives me even more of a reason to wear braids proudly.
I've been lost and I've been found, but I know someone who light my way. Raise me up and show me the way, 'cause I know right now we found our place.
In the 1800s, African women were required to keep their hair covered in head wraps, except on Sundays, when some could remove the wrap and style their hair for church. When left with nothing but their spirit, resilience shone through. Butter and other household items were used to moisturize and condition. With no combs or brushes available, they'd use wool carding tools to comb through tangles. It wasn't much, but it was one little moment when they could feel human again. They'd even use bacon grease for hair care and protective styling. If our hair could talk, it would tell you a story of power. There's no bad texture. Our coils hold the DNA of survivors. Be proud. Be bold. Be unapologetic.
Kwaku woke up as the sun rose. His mother had prepared a breakfast of roasted yams, tomatoes, and onion. A couple centuries ago, European sailors had brought these plants from the Americas to West Africa. Western Europeans began arriving in West Africa as early as the 1400s. They enslaved West Africans to build their settlements. Because of the transatlantic slave trade between Europe, the Americas, and Africa, many different foods were exchanged between the continents. African foods such as okra, watermelon, and coffee were exported to the Americas. Corn, potatoes, and sugarcane from the Americas were brought to Africa. Europeans brought cows and the cultivation of cheeses and milk. Kwaku didn't know this would be the last day he would live in his native land. That night, European slave traders kidnapped Kwaku and his family from their beds. They were chained and kept in the hold of a slave ship en route for the United States. 100 years later, Kwaku's great-great-grandson, Samuel, was born on a South Carolina plantation. Indeed, Samuel was far away from the bountiful gardens of West Africa. But Samuel and his family still grew West African foods like black-eyed peas, greens, and okra. Samuel also grew watermelons in their tiny garden. The family had to work long hours in the hot fields with no break. It was easy to become sick from the heat. They found that eating pieces of watermelon would keep them from fainting and ultimately used this delicious food to survive. Plantation owners believed pork to be the healthiest kind of meat, and they usually raised hogs for slaughter. Samuel learned how to cook with the leftover hog pieces, like intestines and feet. His mother would use the leftover bones to flavor food. Samuel had a great-great-grandson named James, and James loved to cook. James could make fried chicken so well that friends and family would pay him to cook for their parties and holiday dinner. James learned how to fry chicken from his grandmother, who had learned from her mother, who had once been enslaved. During antebellum, white Southern slave owners believed that chicken caused disease and sickness. Subsequently, James's great-grandmother, who was enslaved at the time, was allowed to raise a few chickens. She passed along her fried chicken recipe to her children, and eventually James learned this recipe. James's chicken became so popular that he eventually opened his own restaurant. James loved listening to a new kind of music called soul music. He decided to call his new restaurant the Soul Shack. 50 years later, James's grandson Amir sat in his university lecture hall. He couldn't wait for winter break. His stomach grumbled as he thought about the greens and sweet potato pie that his mother would cook. Amir was studying history. He wanted to be a professor. He often wondered about his own family history. During dinner, he asked his father, "Who was my great-grandfather? What was he like?" Amir's father only knew that he had been enslaved on a South Carolina plantation many years ago. That night, Amir fell asleep, dreaming of a faraway place with deep green plants and trees, and of a people who were strong and brave.
This is the bop. The bop is a type of social dance. Dance is a language, and social dance is an expression that emerges from a community. A social dance isn't choreographed by any one person. It can't be traced to any one moment. Each dance has steps that everyone can agree on, but it's about the individual and their creative identity. Because of that, social dances bubble up, they change, and they spread like wildfire. They are as old as our remembered history. In African American social dances, we see over 200 years of how African and African American traditions influenced our history. The present always contains the past, and the past shapes who we are and who we will be. The Juba dance was born from enslaved Africans' experience on the plantation. Brought to the Americas stripped of a common spoken language, this dance was a way for enslaved Africans to remember where they're from. It may have looked something like this. Slapping thighs, shuffling feet, and patting hands. This was how they got around the slave owners' ban on drumming. Improvising complex rhythms, just like ancestors did with drums in Haiti or in the Yoruba communities of West Africa. It was about keeping cultural traditions alive and retaining a sense of inner freedom under captivity. It was the same subversive spirit that created this dance. The cakewalk, a dance that parodied the mannerisms of Southern high society, a way for the enslaved to throw shade at the masters. The crazy thing about this dance is that the cakewalk was performed for the masters, who never suspected they were being made fun of. Now you might recognize this one. 1920s, the Charleston. The Charleston was all about improvisation and musicality, making its way into Lindy Hop, swing dancing, and even the Kid and Play, originally called the Funky Charleston. Started by a tight-knit black community near Charleston, South Carolina, the Charleston permeated dance halls where young women suddenly had the freedom to kick their heels and move their legs. Now, social dance is about community and connection. If you knew the steps, it meant you belonged to a group. But what if it becomes a worldwide craze? Enter the twist. It's no surprise that the twist can be traced back to the 19th century, brought to America from the Congo during slavery. But in the late 50s, right before the Civil Rights Movement, the twist is popularized by Chubby Checker and Dick Clark. Suddenly, everybody's doing the twist. White teenagers, kids in Latin America, making its way into songs and movies. Through social dance, the boundaries between groups become blurred. The story continues in the 1980s and 90s. Along with the emergence of hip-hop, African-American social dance took on even more visibility, borrowing from its long past, shaping culture and being shaped by it. Today, these dances continue to evolve, grow, and spread. Why do we dance? To move, to let loose, to express. Why do we dance together? To heal, to remember, to say, we speak a common language. We exist and we are free.
Daniel Hale Williams performed the first ever heart surgery in 1893 without the assistance of x-rays, antibiotics, or modern anesthesia. Dr. Dan, as he was known, was born in Pennsylvania and received his medical degree from Chicago Medical School. In 1891, he founded Provident Hospital, the first interracial hospital in Chicago on the city's south side. The hospital established the first black nursing school. One fateful day, 2 years later, a young black man named James Cornish was brought to Provident Hospital with a serious wound on his chest. With his patient bleeding heavily, Williams saw only one option. He performed surgery on James' chest, fixing the severed artery, and then closed the wound. James was discharged 51 days later, fully recovered. He lived another 20 years, proving the success of Dr. Dan's operation. George Washington Carver was a botanist, agricultural chemist, and inventor. His innovation and determination helped to restore the struggling agricultural economy of the South during the early 20th century. Fascinated with nature from an early age, he grew a secret flower garden in the woods near his foster home. He earned the nickname the Plant Doctor by the time he was 10 years old because of his skill in caring for sick plants. At 27, Carver entered Iowa State College of Agriculture and graduated as one of their outstanding scholars. He was appointed their greenhouse director and an assistant instructor in botany. He earned his master's degree in 1896, and out of his long-held desire to help poor black Southerners, he accepted Booker T. Washington's offer to be the director of agriculture at Tuskegee Institute. Southern cotton farmers were bringing in smaller harvests and thus less money. Carver examined the soil and found the cotton plants had taken important nutrients from the soil. He discovered that peanuts, sweet potatoes, soybeans, and cowpeas return nitrogen to the soil, so he urged farmers to plant these in rotation with cotton. the crops helped feed the farmers' families and allowed them to grow more cotton than before. When the farmers struggled to find customers for their peanut and sweet potato crops, Carver made more than 300 products from peanuts, such as ink, shampoo, soap, and candy, and molasses, glue, and flour from sweet potatoes. Carver donated his life savings to Tuskegee to establish the George Washington Carver Foundation, which helped provide research opportunities for students. A museum was also founded in his honor. President Franklin D. Roosevelt ordered the dedication of the George Washington Carver National Monument, located near the scientist's childhood home in Missouri. It was the first national monument dedicated to an African American. George Washington Carver believed, "It is simply service that measures success." Madam C.J. Walker was the first African American millionaire businesswoman in the United States. Born Sarah Breedlove in Louisiana, she was orphaned at age 6. At age 20, she became a widow with a 2-year-old daughter to support. She worked as a washerwoman in St. Louis, Missouri, a job which required difficult manual labor with little pay. Still, she attended night school and saved what money she could to invest in her experiments. Sarah suffered from alopecia, a condition which left her hair dry and brittle, sometimes patches fell out. Dissatisfied with the hair treatments available at the time, she mixed different combinations of oils in her bathtub until she discovered, and after moving to Denver, Colorado, she perfected her treatment and created other products, including a straightening comb, which she patented in 1905. Sarah sold products door to door and used her own before and after photos as proof of her product's effectiveness. Sarah married Charles Joseph Walker in 1906 and began calling herself Madam C.J. Walker. Her Walker method took off, allowing her to establish an office and manufacturing headquarters after only 1 year. With the help of her daughter and nieces, Walker recruited more saleswomen to help sell her products. In 1908, Walker opened a second office in Philadelphia, as well as a beauty parlor and school in Pittsburgh. Her hair courses eventually became available in New York, Indianapolis, and at black colleges throughout the South. In 1917, Walker built a 30-room mansion in New York and began to sponsor black artists and writers, even establishing the Madam Walker Theater Center in Indianapolis. By that time, her manufacturing company took up an entire city block and employed over 3,000 people. Madam C.J. Walker also donated generously to scholarship funds at Tuskegee and Palmer Memorial Institutes and organizations such as the YMCA and the NAACP. Garrett A. Morgan was an African American inventor born in 1875 in Kentucky. One night, a Cleveland Waterworks construction crew became trapped underground in a cloud of toxic fumes when their tunnel beneath Lake Erie exploded. First responders made 2 unsuccessful attempts to rescue the workers. With time running out, the authorities summoned Garrett and his brother Frank. They arrived with a gas mask Morgan had patented 2 years before. Earlier breathing devices were unreliable, so Morgan invented something better. Firefighters, engineers, chemists, and other workers who regularly encountered dangerous gases were already using his breathing device in other cities. He later upgraded his mask with its own air supply, and it became of great importance during World War I and later wars. At the Cleveland disaster site, the Morgan brothers and 2 volunteers strapped on the gas mask and made several brave trips through the darkness of the 200-foot-long toxic tunnel. They rescued more than 20 people. Morgan was awarded a medal from the International Association of Fire Engineers. The gas mask was not his first or last invention. Morgan worked as a handyman at a sewing machine shop in Ohio, and at age 26, sold his belt fastener for sewing machines. 8 years later, he opened a tailoring shop which manufactured dresses and suits. After only 1 year, Morgan and his wife purchased a home where they eventually raised 3 sons. After accidentally discovering a hair straightening substance in 1913, Morgan established the G.A. Morgan Hair Refining Company. The profit supported his continued research. In 1923, Morgan patented an automatic traffic signal, which led to the overhead and sidewalk traffic lights that keep us safe to this day. I always knew I'd go to space. Mae Jemison, the first African-American woman astronaut, once said. Jemison, born in 1956, is also a physician, teacher, and the founder and president of two technology companies, the Jemison Group, and an advanced medical device company, Biosentient Corporation. Born in Alabama and raised in Chicago, Jemison was fascinated with science from an early age. Her father and mother were very encouraging. She said, "My parents were the best scientists I knew because they were always asking questions." Jemison entered Stanford University on scholarship when she was only 16 years old. She graduated with a Bachelor of Science in Chemical Engineering and a Bachelor of Arts in African and African American Studies. In 1981, she received her doctorate from Cornell University Medical College. Jemison practiced medicine in Los Angeles, California, before serving in the Peace Corps as a medical officer in Sierra Leone and Liberia for 2 years. In addition to speaking English, Jemison speaks Swahili, Russian, and Japanese. Inspired by the life of Sally Ride, the first woman in space, Jemison applied to NASA, and in 1987, she became one of only 15 people chosen out of 2,000 candidates for their astronaut corps. Jemison's first and only spaceflight began on September 12, 1992, when the Space Shuttle Endeavour took off for its second mission. Jemison served as the science mission specialist on the 8-day mission, which was a joint effort between the United States and Japan. Jemison resigned from NASA in March of 1993 to form the Jemison Group Incorporated, which highlights ways to bring science and technology to everyday life. The following year, she founded the Dorothy Jemison Foundation for Excellence, named in honor of her mother, which includes an international space camp for high school students called The Earth We Share. In 2011, the U.S. military chose this foundation to receive $500,000 in funding to help launch the 100-year Starship project. Our task, our mission, Jemison explained, is to make sure all the capabilities needed to mount a human interstellar mission exist. Jemison envisions public participation from everyone, regardless of who they are or where they come from. Someday, perhaps, more people will be able to confidently declare, "I always knew I'd go to space."